Welcome back, CSC121 W1 for spring 2023. I'm going to do a little addendum video to our first video, which was exercise 1, where you basically just shared a repel. And I just wanted to go over some things that I may have missed in the first video, just to kind of explain things a little bit better. So I'm going to go back into Replit, and I can't help, look how young I look there. I look a lot older now. Anyway, here's my folder that I created in Replit, and I'm going to go in here, and I only have one repel so far. And to open it up, you just have to click on it. And remember, it's going to open up in a coding window, and then you also have this window over here that has your console and shell. And I'm going to just go over a couple things that I may not have explained. And there's also been some changes to Replit over the past couple months, in the past year, a couple things. And I said a couple things like, well, tools, you don't have to worry about tools. Well, you do have to worry about tools, because if you go into tools, there's all these elements here. And if you click on settings, I'm going to click on this first. It opens up over here in this panel, this right side panel. And you can see you could do it side by side. You could do it stacked like that. And I don't necessarily want it stacked like that. I'll go back here to my settings again, and I'll put it side by side, and I'll reset the layout. And if I go back to settings again, and it opens up over here, I have font size on large. Now you could do that however you want it. I do it large because I'm recording videos, but there's different options here you could have for your font size that you're working on. Also, indent type, you should use tabs, because we're going to be using indents in Python, and they're very important in Python. Maybe not in some other programming languages. Tabs are very important, and indents are very important because we use them instead of curly braces. So make sure you have this to tabs. Make sure you have your indent size to 4 or even higher. If you wanted to put it up to 8, you could do that, but that'll be a really big tab. I think 4 is okay. And if you want to make it bigger, you can make it bigger later. Also, wrapping, make sure that's on soft wrap. And code intelligence, make sure that's enabled. So you should be good with that stuff. Again, tabs, indent size 4, make sure it's on soft wrap, and code intelligence enabled. Now, to get this to go away, you could just close this up. And now where did my console go? Or what if I close this up? Then it's all gone. How do I get that stuff back? Now, to get stuff back, this is kind of like a big panel here. You could go over here to these 3 dots and just go insert right, and it'll start a panel here. Now, nothing will be in it until you actually choose something. So if you want to have the console there, which we will, use the console. If you want to have the shell there, which will use a little bit of the shell, you could go here and do that. So I just wanted to point that out. A couple things I want to point out before getting into the shell is just our code that we worked on here. Remember, we had variables, and variables cannot start with a number. So we're using letters here, and I usually like to keep them all lowercase. You can use underscores in them. You cannot use dashes in them. So we'll point that out as we keep working, but these are variables, and they represent something. So they represent data, and here's a data type of string. These are all strings except for this one. I think one time I said it's a number. Well, it is a number, but it's an integer, and that's a data type. And if you're not sure what data types there are, you can go here and just make a print statement. I'm going to put print, and I'll put parentheses. Now inside here, I'm going to run another function inside that function. And this one is going to check the data type, and it's just called type. So I'm just going to put type, and then in parentheses, another set of parentheses, and make sure you keep these all even. So there should be 4. There's parentheses inside of parentheses. Make sure that you have them even up, and then I'm just going to put in the variable name inside. So if I wanted to know what data type first name is, and I'll just put user, that's shorter. I'll just go in here and type user, and I'll run it. And this will show up in my console. And there it is. There's the first line that's printing out, that is putting all our variables on one line with spaces, and then it's saying class string. So it's actually a string data type. And we knew that already, but that's just proving it. How about this one? I said it's number, it's integer. Well, what is it? Is it float? What is it? Well, I don't know. Let me put in age in here. And let's see what it is. And it's an integer, meaning it's not a decimal. Well, what if it did have a decimal? What if I was 55.5, which I'm not? 55.5, if we put that in there as our value, then what would come up here as that data type? Comes up as float. So now we know 3 data types. We know strings, which are basically letters. And these could be numbers in here, but if they're in quotes, it means they're acting as characters. It's just like if you had an address, you know, and your first number was 3001, that wouldn't be something you're doing any math with. So it would just be a number, it would just be a string. But if you're doing math with it, that would be something else, and that would mean that it's an integer. So that's why it's showing up as a different color here. But with a decimal, it's called a float. So we'll talk about those. So we have float, we have integer, which is without a decimal, and we have strings. And there'll be other data types that we'll talk about. And that's all I think I have to mention about that right now. So I'm going to delete that. Or you could leave it there, actually. If you want to do this and get some extra points for this, you could put that there. So you could put one of your data types there so you remember how to do that. Even if you want to put a little note to yourself, you can put a pound sign. Now notice if you put a pound sign, that'll comment out what I just did. So that'll kind of cover it up or hide it. And if you ever need to hide anything like, oh, I don't want this, you can kind of comment it out. Sometimes in HTML and stuff we'll say comment it out. But we don't want to comment it out, so I'm going to get rid of it. And then here I don't want to comment it out. I want to put a comment above it, so make sure it's on a separate line. And I'm just going to say shows data type. And that way it's like a little bit of notes for you. So that's a little something to show you here. Anything else that I missed? Here's another thing I just want to point out. I'll go back here and I'll just run this again. If you ever thought of changing the name of main.py and you're like, oh, let's just call it ex1 because it's really ex1. Main's very general. You could go here and rename it and call it ex1. And there it is. It's ex1.py. There it is. Looks fine. Everything looks fine. Let's run it. Doesn't recognize it. It's looking for main.py. So I just want to point out that if we ever need to make any other Python files, it doesn't mean you can't have Python files that have different names, but in Replit, it's pointing to main first, and then you would have to use pointers to other files, which we'll do later on. But right now, just keep it main. So I just want to point it out. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to put it back to main and run it again just to make sure it works. Okay. So we're good with that. Now, I just want to show the shell a little bit. You'll do some reading about shells and things like that. And I just want to point out here, the console is basically kind of an output window, really. It's just outputting what you're running here. So you're not doing anything in the console, really. You're just outputting there. But shell is something else. If you go on shell, you can see it's showing a main directory. And if you ever use terminal on a Mac or PowerShell or command prompt on Windows, you may have seen this. You could use this with MySQL and some other things, or even if you just have to do some troubleshooting on your computer, some of you may have worked with this already. And we're going to use some bash commands, which are Unix-like commands. And I'll just go over a couple of these right now just to get started. One of them I could do is just, this isn't a command, but I'm going to put Python and I'm going to put -- version. And that'll show what version of Python we're working in. And we're working in 3.8.12. And another thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to put ls, which means like list all the data in the directory, or list the files in the directory. It's like a list command. Just ls, and then you hit enter. And it's showing main, poetry, lock, py project, Replit NIX, and VNV. Now we're not seeing them all here because some of those are going to be invisible files, but that's what's in the directory. And you could also put pwd. Here's something else you could do. Pwd is print working directory. That's going to give you the full name of the directory. And again, I'm just putting pwd, and I'll hit enter, and it's showing me home, runner, and then 1-replit homa rcn. That's my repel that's there. So that's showing me the directory. And if you want to navigate through the directory, another command you could use is cd, which is change directory. So if you want to go back out or up a directory, you're going backwards, but you're going up a directory because this is something that's inside of that, which is inside of that. So if you want to go back out, you could go cd space and then just put ... and then hit enter. Now, how do you know where you are? Well, you could go pwd. And now you're in runner. Instead of replit homa rcn, you're in runner. And if you want to see what's there, put ls. And it should show you that the 1-replit is inside there. And it does. So that's showing what's inside there. And then let's try it again. Let's go cd space ... and hit enter. And now we're inside of home. And now if I do pwd, it should just say home again. And if I do ls, it should show me runner being inside it. And there it is. And then I could even go one more and go cd space ... I'm going back again, hit enter. And again, I'll do pwd, and it's just showing me a slash, and I'll do ls to see what's inside there, and it's showing me a bunch of system files here. You're going to see bin and things like that. So that's stuff that you'll see in your system files on your computer if you ever dig into those. Now to go back out, we would have to kind of work our way with this stuff here. So I could even go up here to here and just highlight this. I'll highlight that whole directory and copy it. I'll do Command C since I'm on a Mac. If you're on Windows, you can do Control C, and I'll go here and I'll paste it, and then I should be able to hit enter and be back in it. Did I do something wrong here? Oh, I know what I did. I screwed something up here. Anybody know what I did? I never put CD. I forgot to put CD. So I'll put CD space, and then I'll paste it. And let's see if that works. And that works. So now I'm back in the right directory. So that was my mistake. And again, you're going to make mistakes all the time. So that's what the mistake I made. So hopefully you saw that. So that's all you have to do there. And if you did this stuff, if you did it with me, just trying it out, some of these commands, print working directory, list the files, CD is changing directories, and you can actually run Python in here. And I'll show you how to do that, but it's really not that beneficial because you only get one line at a time. It's much easier to work in a code editor and then output your files. But one thing you can do, and I'll show you this one last thing here, is you can go Python, it's saying reconnecting here, so I'm having an issue. Let me click here and type Python at the prompt, and then a space, and then I'm going to put the file name, and I'm going to put main.py. And that's basically going to run the source file in the shell. And I'll hit enter. And there it is. It actually ran what we were seeing in the console. So we're actually running that file in the shell. Now, I'm just showing this just because we don't want to work in our actual shell and terminal and PowerShell and all that. If we were in the classroom, we might be doing that. And there's some benefits to this, and there's some that really aren't that beneficial. But it's good to know your way around these bash commands in this kind of Unix-like atmosphere in here, because you may have to do things in it, and it's, you know, you don't want to be intimidated by doing that. You just have to understand that you have to go forwards and backwards. It's not easy to just kind of move around with your mouse and put your cursor here and put your cursor there. But you can exit out of here. You could just close. You could trash this. But one thing, before you do any of that, what I want you to do, like let's say if you wanted to prove to me that you did this, you could highlight all this stuff, and I think we can go Command A or Control A, and then I'll do Command C or Control C if you're on Windows to copy all this text here. Now, what are you going to do with it to show me that you did it? Because it's just going to go away. Well, you could go over here and make a new file. And I'm just going to call it shell.txt, a text file. And there it is. And it looks like it pasted it in already, but if it didn't, I'm not sure why it's there already, but unless it did it because this was highlighted, but if it's not here, then just paste it. And that way, it'll take all your information that you put in here. Let me see. Is this correct? Yeah, it is, because we did the version was the first thing we did. So that's all our information. So that's kind of proving to me that you actually are able to navigate through your shell over here and do some shell commands. We used to do that in Python Anywhere previously, and I didn't think we could do it here, but we can do it. And there may be some times where that may be beneficial, but I just want you to be aware of it because you're going to read about it a little bit, interpreters and things like that. So this is more of an interpreter that you could run MySQL. You can run Python in here, run Python commands, but why? Why not do them here where it's easy to see the code and you can create variables and all that kind of stuff. So if you do this, you don't have to do anything, but just close it and it's there. And you don't even have to share it with me because I could already see it when it's there. So I'm going to make another little assignment where I'll give you, I don't know, 10 or 15 extra points just for doing that. And that way you can get some extra skill doing that, and plus also hopefully go over some of this other stuff in Replit that I missed the first time around. And again, just to know your way around Replit here, let's see, I don't want this open anymore. You could just close it. And now where's my file? Well, you could go here to main.py, and if you don't want these together, remember you could go here and say insert left, and you could close main py here, and you could go here, and if you just do files and go to main py, you could do your file right here, Keep your console over here. You don't really need the shell, other than we were kind of messing around with it, but that way you have your output here in the console. We have our code here that we're working on, our main.py file, and hopefully you'll get to know your way around Replit just a little bit more as we do that. One last thing I just want to point out while I'm talking about this stuff is errors. You're going to make a lot of errors, and that's normal, and one of the most common errors is the undefined error. And what that means is there's a variable up here that's assigned, and then down here you try to do it, but you spelled it wrong. I'll spell last name wrong. Now, it'll tell you right away. That way you don't even have to go and run the file. It'll tell you right away. It'll pick it up. And it'll say undefined, right? It says undefined. Well, let me just run it just so we can see the error message here. And it'll say name error undefined. Now, people will be like, well, what happened? I don't know what's going on. Well, it says line 9. Well, look at line 9. Oh, there's line 9. And it's saying name last nam is not defined. Now, what do you think that means? Well, it means it doesn't know what last nam is. And then you could look and go, oh, I spelled last name wrong and I put last nam. You'd be surprised how many people do this and they're like, I don't know what's wrong with it. Well, it's telling you what's wrong about it. So this is a name error, and that's kind of common. You spell things wrong, you make typos all the time, but it even catches it before you run the file. So there's runtime errors, but this is just a name error right off the bat. So undefined, that's something that'll happen all the time. You'll change the name of a variable, and it won't change in two places. But Replit will try to show you that so you don't even have to get to this point. And if you put it back now, then it'll work. Now, another error that's going to come up occasionally is, let's say you just put +5 here. You add a number to what you're printing out and just see what it does. And you might get something like that. There's a type error. So it's unsupporting just kind of adding an integer to what you're doing here. So those are some things that we'll talk about. We'll talk about runtime errors. And I have some reading about that, but this way you can kind of get used to seeing that. You can look and see, oh, it's on line 9. And even if you don't understand completely what's going on, you should be able to kind of track things down a little bit when you do that. So Python's very good about doing that. Sometimes in HTML and CSS, it's really hard to track down errors. But here it's a little bit easier, I think. It'll tell you what exactly line you're on and what's happening when you're doing that. So I just wanted to point that out as well. So I'll fix that, and that's all I'm going to do with this one. So we'll move on to another exercise after this, but we're going to use these things here. So we're going to use some of this stuff and put some of these things together, and I put an age in there so we could do some math and things like that and start building on some of these real simple things that we're starting with. So that'll be coming up in our next exercise, exercise 2. This thing I might call exercise 1b, where we just did the shell text. I'll call that 1b, and then you'll get some credit for doing that. So thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later in exercise 2.